Hello again. So I'm back here on my Good Enough Mum page, and today what I've been thinking about, talking about, is all about Christmas and the Christmas busyness that we tend to feel in December, and maybe ways in which we can help ourselves make our lives a little bit easier for ourselves. And particularly because this is my Good Enough Mum page, I'm thinking about what it's like for us as women and as mums as we prepare for Christmas. And of course, Christmas can be a very different experience depending on what your personal circumstances are. And one of the first things I want to address and think about is to do with our sort of expectations. And it struck me a little while ago after we'd made arrangements for Christmas, having talked to various family members and finding out that they'd made other arrangements, feeling a sort of little bit disappointed that it wasn't going to be the Christmas that perhaps I'd like it to be. But thinking, it's so easy, isn't it, to compare ourselves to what we think other people are doing and how other families are, and realising that in fact a lot of us are going to have quiet Christmases because that's the way it is for many of us, and especially if there's been perhaps big changes in the family over the last couple of years. So perhaps children are growing up, or perhaps there's been a split in the family, and the way the family works now is completely different. And approaching Christmas when it's like that can be quite difficult, because we can think of the past and we can think of the way it has been in the past, and we can feel quite sad to think that it's not going to be like that anymore. I think there's a couple of ways in which we can approach that particular thought. There's I think to acknowledge that perhaps things have changed, and that change does bring some sadness because, you know, things aren't going to be the same again. But to remember that nothing can actually take away perhaps happy memories of bigger Christmases, but also to let go of the thought that Christmas should be a certain way, and that the way it's always been done in the past is the way it needs to be in order for us to be happy. Because it is up to us how we respond to our situation. And sometimes we can't change the circumstances. We can't change what's happened. We can't change the way other people behave or have behaved. All we can do is to change our reaction to those circumstances and to those people, and we can decide how we want to respond to those circumstances and to those people, and we can take pride in ourselves in being able to choose our response and being able to respond in the way that makes us feel good. And part of this perhaps might be thinking about different rituals and different ways of doing Christmas this year, and perhaps making it a little bit different and looking for new ways in which we can still make it meaningful to us. But I think also as well to be kind to ourselves and to acknowledge that perhaps the change that is there is something perhaps that we find difficult, that we don't necessarily want, and to allow those feelings to be there and to honour those feelings, and perhaps even on Christmas Day, if we need to have a moment or two where we take ourselves away and perhaps have a little bit of quiet, perhaps do something like, if it's someone who perhaps has died this year who we miss, is perhaps to do something that really honours them, to perhaps have a look at a photograph of them, to have a little cry if that's what we need, to perhaps light a candle in memory of them, in some way to honour them and ourselves in the loss that we feel. So, you know, to look after ourselves in a way. Something else that has struck me in the last week is about how it's Advent at the moment, and I don't tend to really think very much about Advent. Obviously, we have our Advent calendars, but that can often be a time of, oh my God, we've only got so many days before Christmas is coming. But actually, Advent is a time in terms of Christmas in the Christian calendar, where it's a time of sort of thought preparation and reflection in order to prepare ourselves for the big day. And it really struck me this year that it might be quite nice to include something in December that could be perhaps a time for reflection, a time, although we're very busy in December, perhaps a time just to give ourselves a chance to think. And what I'm doing this year is a couple of things. One is one of my coaching friends is running a 3-week course where we're looking back over the past year and we're celebrating the achievements of the past year. We're also looking at what's been difficult in the last year and what we've learnt from it, and using those things to move forward into next year as a preparation and a planning for the new year. And although Christmas time, this December time, is usually time where I am really frantic, I thought that would be a really lovely thing for me to do in order to prepare myself for the new year. And the other thing I'm doing is I've got a lovely book of poems that are sort of poems for this particular season of the year. So I read the poems in the evening, and it's a poem a day for Advent. And so far it's been talking about, thinking about the autumn and the cold weather coming in, and poems centred around that. And I've started a new ritual, which is that I have decided I'm not going to take my phone up to the bedroom with me, that I'm going to charge my phone downstairs, because I find it too tempting to look at my phone in the evening. And hello everybody who's watching, just sort of seeing that you've joined me. Yes, instead of taking my phone up in the to the bedroom in the evening, where it's so tempting for me to start doing things like looking at Facebook or looking at the news or reading blogs, I've actually decided that the phone stays downstairs so that I can get a better night's sleep. And I've started reading one of these poems every evening. And it's a really nice way to just unwind and to give me a little bit of chance to stop at this busy time of year. So to be able to give myself time just to reflect on the passing of the time. And then the other thing I sort of just wanted to mention is to think about how can we make this time of year a bit simpler for ourselves. So one of the things I'm doing is recognising that this is a really busy time of year for me. And so I'm probably not going to be doing a lot in terms of working on future plans for my business at this point. And I think that's going to wait until the new year, where probably I'll be feeling ready and fresh to do that. But I'm just going to keep things ticking over. And that's in a sense a way of sort of being kind to myself, to recognise that this is a special time of year and that I don't need to be pushing forward in other areas, that I can take this time to reflect really. And in a sense, because there's a lot going on in another area of my life, which is my sort of family life, that I need to just take things a little bit more quietly in terms of my work. And it's maybe that's something that perhaps you could consider as well. And maybe ask yourself, what are the ways that I could make this time of year a little bit simpler for myself? And I think we're becoming so much more relaxed now about things like Christmas cards and presents, and to see if perhaps, is it necessary to send so many Christmas cards if that's something you still do? Or can you do something else? So one of my friends has just put on Facebook that they're trying to raise money for a particular good cause. And so this year that's what they're going to be doing rather than sending Christmas cards. And, you know, that's absolutely fine, isn't it? And also, something that Martin Lewis suggests, and I think this is really helpful, is to talk to friends and family about, do we want to give Christmas presents to each other? Or can we perhaps agree that we won't swap Christmas presents this year, especially if funds are a bit tight? And I think there's a whole thing that we could talk about in terms of our expectations of ourselves and what we think the festive season should be about. And just a bit earlier on, I was talking about comparing ourselves to others. And I think there's a whole area of perfectionism that can come in as we get ready for this time of year. And the sort of things that we expect of ourselves and the way that we expect ourselves to be. And to maybe really question whether or not that's helpful to us. And to maybe let go of the expectations on ourselves. To sort of do things like make it as easy as possible. So this probably isn't something that lots of other people feel, but I went through a long phase where I felt that the best way to do Christmas was to make everything myself in terms of the food. And now I just sort of think, how daft is that? Why spend 8 hours steaming Christmas pudding when you can just buy one quite easily? And who really notices apart from ourselves on these sort of expectations that we put on ourselves? Because just do what's easiest for us. I think that's the way to go forward, really, is how can we make things simpler? And if we enjoy making things, perhaps that's a really lovely ritual, and that's a ritual that we enjoy. And to do that, but then to think, well, what else could I let go of so that I'm not rushing around like a mad thing? You get closer and closer to the end of December, and people are just going completely mad and feeling under such pressure. And a lot of it is down to the expectations that we place on ourselves. And how can we move away from placing those expectations on ourselves? And how can we make things simpler for ourselves? And I'd be really interested if anybody wants to write in the comments, what are the ways that, what are the sorts of hacks that we could have, the sort of life hacks that we could have to make things easier on ourselves? I'm just going to glance down at my bit of paper here and see if there's anything else that I've missed out. Yeah, really about performance. A lot of what we do when we're trying to be perfectionist is, we're putting on a performance. We're trying to prove something. We're trying to prove something maybe to ourselves or to other people, and we really don't need to, because we are enough in ourselves. And one of the things I was thinking about as I was getting ready for today is that we can really flog ourselves to death in trying to make, it doesn't have to be Christmas, it can be any event. We can flog ourselves away trying to make things as perfect as possible. But people are going to come along to whatever event we're organising, and it's actually up to them whether or not they enjoy it. And if they want to find fault, they will. If they want to criticise your Christmas pudding that you've bought rather than made, if that's something that they've got a thing about, that's their thing. And they're going to criticise you, whatever you do. And even if you do make your Christmas pudding, I mean, this is a bit of a silly example, but even if you did make your Christmas pudding, they'd probably still find something wrong with it anyway. So the fact is that other people's feelings about our events, they're not our business. We can do our best to make it as nice as possible for people. But if they're going to be grumpy, they're going to be grumpy. It's their stuff. It's not our stuff. It's their responsibility to look after their own feelings. And we can do everything to try and make things nice for people. We can do everything to try and please them, to get them nice gifts, to make the table as beautiful as possible. And if that brings us joy, that's wonderful. I know friends who just have such a delight in having the table as beautiful as possible. And that's just fabulous. If that's what floats their boat, I'm really not criticising that at all. But if people are going to come along and find fault with it, don't take it personally. Get the satisfaction out of knowing that you've done it as beautifully as can give you joy and satisfaction. And that if other people don't like it, that's their business. Yeah, and someone's just saying, I'd love not to have to invite those critical people. I agree. But in a sense, I'm just thinking about that. They're going to be critical anyway. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And whatever we do, they're going to find fault. And that actually is not our fault. That is just the way they are. And they're not our responsibility. Their feelings are not our responsibility, because the people who are going to enjoy it and they're going to have fun. If I had one year where I completely forgot to cook Christmas pudding, so there was this sort of long gap where I had to think, oh my God, I forgot to put the Christmas pudding on, and it's supposed to have steamed for hours. Of course, just put it in the microwave is absolutely fine. And I often set the Christmas pudding on fire because I put the holly and I put masses of alcohol in the the Christmas pudding, and then the whole thing just goes up in flames. And you get a sort of crisp bit of holly. Now, you can either look on that as fun, or you can look on it as, it's just a silly example, but or people can criticise that. But the people who are going to enjoy it are going to enjoy it, aren't they? And the people who are going to be critical of it are going to be critical of it, and that's their bag. It's not our responsibility. And it gives us a bit of freedom to be able to think, I can do what I want to do, and I can make it as beautiful and as lovely as I like. And that's my responsibility. I can put on a lovely feast, and if that's what gives me joy and I enjoy it, then yes, I'm going to do that. And if it, like for me, I really enjoy the smell of, I make bread sauce. Actually, no one in my family really eats it apart from me. But one of the things I really like doing is I soak the onion overnight in the milk. So you bring the onion, which is studded with cloves, to boil in the milk, and then just leave it to infuse the milk. And I just think it's such a beautiful flavour, and it's such a lovely smell. I really like to do it. So I'll do that because it gives me joy and satisfaction, but nobody else really, thinks about it. But for me, it's one of those lovely things that reminds me of being a child and of being at home, and that brings me joy. So I'm going to do that, despite the fact that I don't have real problems, because I've made sort of like a pint of bread sauce, and I have a spoonful of it, and that's it. It's a bit wasteful, really, and I just have to learn to make a little bit less, and and then I keep it in the fridge until it goes off, and then I can throw it away. It's sort of like, I can throw away that bread pudding after I've had my spoonful of it. It's just a silly thing, but anyway, so that's what I'd sort of encourage you to think about, really, is how perfect does it have to be? Does it bring me joy? And if it doesn't bring me joy, can I let go of it? And also, can I let go of the need to please people? Because in a sense, if I have to please people, what I'm doing is I'm making my happiness dependent on them. Hi Louise, it's good to see you. Yeah, what I'm doing is I'm making my happiness dependent on their reaction, rather than making my happiness dependent on what brings me joy. So to a certain extent, it's about letting go of the need to please other people. Obviously, we want to make people happy, but in the end, whether or not they're happy is their responsibility. It's not our responsibility. We can do everything. We can create the conditions for people to enjoy themselves, but in the end, whether or not they enjoy themselves is up to them. And we can take joy and satisfaction in knowing that we've done the best that we can to make it fun. But in the end, if other people aren't going to enjoy it, that's their stuff. And we can just take pleasure in knowing that what we've done is the best that we can do, and to actually take joy in that. So I hope that's maybe helped a bit. It's quite early to be talking about this sort of stuff, but maybe allow ourselves to take the pressure off ourselves for the whole of December, and just to think, how can I use December to make it a pleasurable experience, to really not make the focus just on that one day, but also to make December itself a time of fun, to enjoy each day. So to enjoy the fun as well. Yeah. So Lawrence just said, bring on the mulled wine and have a lovely Christmas, Joe. Yeah, that's quite right. And the same for you as well. So I will be back for the next couple of weeks. Obviously, I won't be here on the 26th of December, but I am going to be around for a couple of weeks. And I know it's a busy time of year for people, so I'm not expecting huge audiences. But yeah, try and live for, today's only the 5th of December. And so what can we do today to make today fun and to live for today, not for the 25th? Okay then, so I'll hopefully see you next week if you'd like to join me, and look after yourselves and have a good week. Bye.